And welcome back to Stream City Radio, Stream City Sports, and streamcity.org if you're looking for the radio side of things. Talking about the overview of where we've gone sideways, things that have to change. And now we're going to talk about the solutions. How do we get control of this? What do we have to do to make it make sense and to make it sustainable? And I will start right off the bat with the direct payment to players, because that's a big part of what we've got going on. And here would be my proposal. And I know we'll start with the $22 million number because that's the number that's been floated and maybe the number that actually is. Divide the $22 million of TV revenue for each school evenly between the 85 scholarship players. And you can tie this directly to whatever the schools are making off TV dollars. Make it a percentage, sliding scale. If they're making more money, it goes up. If they're making less money, it goes down. But every school, regardless of position, regardless of starting status, regardless of playing time, if they're one of the 85 players on the roster, on the active roster, they are all paid the same, from the starting quarterback to the second string punter. And I know people are going to go, oh, you can't do that. Yeah, that's the only way you can do it. You can't do it any other way. That's the way it has to happen. Because what that does is it now eliminates the bidding war for players around money. So you've evened the playing field again. Where a player can make more money, we'll get into that because that's where NIL, but a true NIL comes into place. We're talking about the direct payment to the players, what's coming from the schools. So that's a non-negotiable. If you do anything else, you're gonna have problems. And at the end of the day, nobody can really argue that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm taking their scholarships away. If I'm dividing $22 million amongst 85 football players, they don't need scholarships. Now, and then I would make a designation around these players as paid student athletes, not scholarship athletes or employees, but paid student athletes. And that's where some legislation could come in, and that's about the only place I want to involve the government in any of this, would be some sort of antitrust where you could do this, because if you make them employees, you're going to go down the union road, which will not work when you're constantly turning over the rosters and who would be members. This is not something where somebody's going to be a 30-year member of the labor union, or even, on average, whatever it works out to be in the NFL. But as a paid student athlete, you are still going to be required to maintain your GPA, number of courses per semester, and if you fail to meet those requirements, you're not kicked off the team, but you don't get paid because you're not eligible to play. Because if your GPA is not a certain level and you're not enrolled in a certain number of classes, then you're not eligible and you don't get paid by the school. Very simple. I think players should get bonuses when it comes to playing in bowl games or playing in the playoffs. And that could be designated ahead of time. But it needs to be level across the board. If you make the first round of playoffs, every player in there gets X number of dollars. If you make a bowl game, every player in there gets X number of dollars. Or that could even be tiered, because obviously some bowls pay more than other bowls do. So it's got to be reasonable. But I think you're asking them to play an extra game, there it is. But guess what? You have to play the game. There's no sitting out. None. You're not allowed to. If you sit out you're going to not only forego that game check, but you're going to be penalized, and it needs to be standard across the board. Collectives will be banned. There will be no more collectives. There will be a clearinghouse for NIL established at each school and monitored at the league level. Everybody has to take a financial literacy course before they can receive any NIL money and before they could receive over a certain amount of their direct payment. Now, that money all still would be there, but they can't receive it until they complete their financial literacy, because it is a shame for these kids to make all this money, and some of them will never even sniff an NFL career. And that's really the biggest reason I don't have a problem with these kids getting paid at the college level, is most of them are never going to play pro ball. And if they do, it's going to be on a rookie contract that they never see a second one. There will be no direct payments to the players. All NIL will go through the clearinghouse. And nobody gets paid until they complete whatever the NIL is. Now, the clearinghouse for the school could collect that money ahead of time. In other words, if I'm doing a TV commercial, it is fair to say that that payment is made to the clearinghouse at whatever university, but it cannot be given to the student athlete until after they have fulfilled that contract. Otherwise, you're going to end up with unfulfilled, empty contracts. At that point, and I would even say for an incoming student, do it as a summer course. Have it a summer course for financial literacy that they take before they ever enroll in school, or they're enrolled in school. That gets them in school. They're taking a summer course. Now, when the fall hits, they're ready to roll. I would maintain all permissible, everything that they get through a scholarship right now, as far as the food program, housing, all those benefits that players get, they should maintain. Even though they won't be on a scholarship, that should be part of their deal. What you're going to have to do with this, and the other part of this is, and we'll get into it, like I said, with the NIL portion of it, but this is just referring to the direct payment of players. But the other part of this is, I want to put into place a governing body that if you break the rules, we're going to crush your soul. Because a booster caught paying outside of the structure will be banned for life, for any contact with that school ever, the school's football program ever again. They will also be fined 10 times whatever the illegal payment was. I slipped you $1,000, I'm going to pay 10 grand. And I'm going to divide that 10 grand up, or whatever that fine is. It's not going to the governing body. It is going to all your opponents that you played during the time that you were making the illegal payments. So not only now are you not going to get to participate with the school you love, not only now are you going to be light in the wallet, you are going to financially aid everybody you hate. Schools caught paying outside the structure will pay an equivalent amount to every school they played during that time of the infraction. A second offense within 5 years will result in the school paying an equivalent amount to every school they played during that time of the infraction and being relegated down to the next level, with no ability to return for 10 years. I'm crushing your soul. If you're going to cheat, I will grind your phenoblies into dust. That brings us to name, image, and likeness. Now, this is where players can make more money. The starting quarterback now can make more money than the third string guard because NIL's where they're going to do that. But NIL is going to be stringently followed. It will have to fall into predetermined categories that have been approved by the governing body and use an established fair market national pay scale, just like they do for actors. If you're going to do a personal appearance, sign autographs, do a TV commercial, radio commercial, a billboard, whatever, there will be a pre-published national pay scale for that. That may not be the same. It might be it might pay $500 to $1,000 for something, whatever, however you want to establish it. But it's going to be predetermined what that can pay. So the days of paying somebody $10 million to come sign an autograph, they're gone. No freshman will get NIL until after they start their first semester. So if I am a signee at a school, I cannot collect $1 until I am enrolled and in school. So no more bidding for players. Once again, collectors will be banned. A clearinghouse for NIL established at each school and at the league level. Schools may keep a list of interested players and provide that list to companies. They cannot go out and recruit on behalf of those players, nor can boosters. No direct payments will be made to athletes. All payments must be processed through the school clearinghouse and reported to the governing body. I think I actually touched on that earlier when I was talking about direct payments, and it really applies more here. No NIL payment will be made prior to the player fulfilling their obligation, but may be made to the clearinghouse and held until the obligation is fulfilled. School officials, coaches, boosters shall not solicit for NIL deals. We're doing away with that. Company, you can have somebody who's in charge of handling NIL that is a direct contact for companies to come to. You can even run an advertising awareness campaign telling local businesses or national businesses or whoever that you are open for business on NIL deals. Memorabilia tied directly to a player, such as jersey sold through the school, will be distributed on a quarterly basis. And once again, we're going to have some pricing involved. Players receiving payments outside of the NIL structure will be fined twice the amount of the illegal payment and lose the ability for future NIL income. So you get caught cheating, you don't get to do it anymore. Businesses found to be in violation will be unable to participate in the NIL program moving forward ever again. Period. Schools found in violation shall be fined the amount of the illegal payment all the way up to 10 times of the payment, depending on the nature of the infraction. Repeated infractions will result in the loss of paid player positions. In other words, your 85 could be reduced if you're caught violating this multiple times. And that basically is where I would come down on the financial side of things. Now, we took away the scholarships. Those scholarships, you got 85 of them, can go to other sports. But I'm also in favor of creating a practice squad. Instead of the 105 that's been floated, let's do 85 active active paid players and a 25-man practice squad. that will receive full scholarships. Practice roster players will not be eligible for NIL because otherwise they're not practice players. They will receive a full scholarship. They can be paid stipends, but those would be, once again, determined by the governing body. Practice players could accompany the team on travel, and that would be subject to coach's discretion. Practice players may be called up to game-eligible roster if, due to injury to game day roster players at their positions, numbers have dropped below the needed number predetermined by position to maintain a normal game day roster. In other words, keep this simple. I've got my coach has said I need 6 wide receivers on my active roster. I've got 2 more on the practice squad. I can't operate with fewer than 4. Okay? I get a third injury, now I can call somebody up from a practice roster. But here's the caveat to that. I have to be taking the place of somebody who's done for the season. This can't be a 1-week deal. So, in other words, if I got a guy who, I don't know, bruised his butt, can't play this week, but he's going to be back next week, that doesn't count. But if I have anybody amongst that group of receivers who's out for the year and now I have dropped to below what I've predetermined as the number I have to be at, I can pull somebody up from the practice roster and they become a paid player for the rest of the season. Very simple. Practice squad roster players, because one of the things we're going to talk about also with this is when you sign with a school, you're committing for 3 years, period. That will not apply to somebody who's on the practice squad. If I'm on the practice squad, I can enter the transfer portal pretty much at any point I want. So that leaves them some flexibility. Of course, we're going to get into the transfer. It's going to be 1 a year. So it's not like you can leave anytime, but you don't have to wait out the 3 years, is basically what I'm saying. A booster caught paying a practice squad player will be banned for life and fined 10 times the amount of the illegal payment. Schools or coaches caught paying outside the structure will lose the ability to call up practice squad players for 2 seasons. A second offense within 5 years will result in the loss of practice squad players for 4 seasons. So you can play by the rules or we're going to hurt your feelings. And that's the way it needs to be. One of the other things that's going to come into play in a big way in this is going to be the agents. Agents, all players must have a single representative listed with the governing body. This can be a player, it could be a parent, it could be a guardian, or a professional agent. Only the official representative or the player may engage with schools around scholarships, direct payments, or NILs. In other words, if I have an agent, Uncle John can't be out there negotiating deals for me. It has to go through the agent. All professional agents must be approved by the governing body. Once approved, professional agents must obtain and maintain an insurance policy for every player they sign, listing the player as the sole beneficiary of the policy against career-ending injury or injury that significantly impacts that player's professional career. And that's why I don't want to hear any whining about having to play bowl games or whatever. You're in, you're in. You're getting paid, you are getting paid. And with the good comes some responsibility. Failure to maintain these policies will result in the immediate suspension of the agent's designation as an official representative, until such time as all policies are current. The agent will also be personally responsible for covering the equivalent to any claim that could be filed during the lapse in coverage. In other words, I've got you insured. I'm an agent. It falls through the cracks. I don't make a payment. You get injured. I'm not an agent anymore. And oh, by the way, I'm now responsible for whatever that policy would have paid. Because if you're going to play by the rules, or we're going to make you pay. Very simple. Transfer rules. This is cut and dry. A 3-year agreement for all paid players, binding on both the school and the player, shall take effect on signing day. This guarantees a player's spot on the team and prevents their transfer. Players with career-ending injuries would be removed from the roster, but and we need to get into how that would be handled. I would, at that point, I would say we allow them to have a scholarship to continue their education, but they come off, they're no longer paid. Only true hardship transfers will be allowed within this time. Because there will be things that will come up that legitimately, we don't want to hold a kid hostage, but it's going to have to be a legitimate one, and we would have to have a clearinghouse that handled that as well. We are going to limit players to 2 transfers, period. You're locked in for 3, so you really don't have a lot of room for more than 2, but it's 2 maximum. But that would also apply to somebody coming off of a practice roster. 2 maximum. And only one of them will be a lateral transfer. So in other words, I'm at Auburn. I want to transfer to Michigan. I can do that at the end of my 3rd year. But I can't turn around the next year and transfer to Rutgers. But what I could do is I could transfer to Western Michigan. Or it could happen the other way around. I could go to a smaller school and then come back up. Because you'll have kids that will, maybe they're at Auburn, it's not working out. They transfer to another big school and realize, you know what, my talent level doesn't give me the ability to play it. So I want to transfer down. Let them do it. So 2 transfers, 1 lateral, and 1 can be up or down. There will be a 2-week transfer window, period. That is it. No more, no less. One time, and I would, and we'll talk about it because we're going to talk about the calendar as well. But that would be 1 transfer, period. 1 2-week window, and you're done. Players coming from junior college or lower levels are subject to the rules governing their current classification. In other words, what applies to this level may not apply to JUCO, so that would all have to be worked out. In the event of a coaching change, the incoming coach can grant waivers to players who may not fit their new system, i.e. what happened a few years ago at Georgia Tech, where you had somebody come in and go, I don't need 27 fullbacks on this team. So you whittle it down, you let the ones transfer out. But once again, you can't kick them out. You can give them the option to leave, but you cannot make them leave. So if they don't want to stay, then you're stuck with 27 running backs or fullbacks. Just the way it is. It has to be a mutual agreement nullifying the 3-year guarantee. Players not receiving a waiver in their first 3 years cannot transfer or be cut from a team. Adult situation. If I'm on an NFL team and they fire the coach, I don't get to leave. You're an adult now, so you better go someplace you're happy being. And the coach can be a big part of that, but just know you're there for 3 years at a minimum, and coaching changes happen, and you're going to have to live with it. And, it just is what it is. So that'll wrap it up for this show number 2 of if it's on radio, it's all one show, but show number 2 of the college football fix. And we'll be back next week. We're going to talk tampering, because you think I was harsh on people paying outside. Wait till I get a hold of people tampering. You're going to love that, because that is not going to happen. Not more than once. So we'll get into the tampering, and we will get into the draft. I have some changes around that. Program revenue and the calendar. We'll try and tackle all of those before we get into playoffs and scheduling. And then all the different ways that I have rearranged college football that would work. So there you go. It is what it is. We'll come back and wrap up the radio show. This does it for us over on the video side of things on Stream City Sports. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you catch us again. Like and subscribe if you would like. It'll keep you up to date. It'll keep getting these things sent to you. And you can keep up with my my thoughts. You know, you might like them, you might not. Let me know. Feel free to comment. And if, depending on the comment, I might comment back. So there you go.